Hi, everybody. Well, today we continue on in our discussion on the Sermon on the Mount and, in particular, the Beatitudes, which we find in Matthew chapter 5. Yesterday we looked at the first Beatitude, which is, "Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And we talked a little bit about how poor in spirit isn't being impoverished or being poor physically or emotionally, or even for that matter, spiritually, but it's rather being unassuming, non-judgmental, poor in pride. And as we are that, we can then see and appreciate all the things that God is doing to establish his kingdom. Let's move on to the next verse, Matthew 5, verse 4, which says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Now, the word mourn here that Jesus uses isn't the kind of moping or the sense of feeling dour and sad. It's actually a much deeper. It's someone who passionately laments on behalf of ourselves and our own sin and our way that we have gone astray, or on behalf of the sin that we see around us, the sin of our people, as the prophets of old would have done. They would have lamented deeply. They would have mourned grievously over the sin of their community and the world in their vicinity. Well, that's kind of the word that Jesus is using here in this beatitude. It's that kind of grieving, that deep, deep mourning over the wrong that we see in the world. And God knows we've seen a lot of wrong happening in the world, and not in particular just over what's happened in this last week. And that sense of saying, God, this is not right. And we don't just let it pass by, but we enter into this sense of inner groaning and lamenting over the sin that we see. It's perhaps even mourning or grieving over personal loss, whether it's the loss of a job or the loss of a child. Oh, I can't believe how hard that would be. But knowing some people who have walked through that understand just a little bit how horrible that is, and that the depth of their mourning is there. There's also the mourning over our own wrongs and our own sinfulness, that realization that's different than what it was when we were a kid and we were caught fighting with her brother or sister, and her mother or father came by and said, "Now apologize, say sorry." And we would turn and say, "I'm sorry." And they would say, "I'm sorry," but you weren't really sorry. There was no grieving. There weren't words of true admission of our own guilt and our own sin. But here this morning is that recognition of how far we have separated from what God actually wanted to accomplish in our life, and we grieve deeply. Well, Jesus says you are blessed if you mourn that way, because you will be comforted. You will be comforted. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul says to the people, he says, "Praise be," starting from verse 3, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of all compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God." It's that same way. When we understand how to mourn, we also know and understand more so how to comfort others when they are mourning and grieving. Because we have received that comfort from God, we too can be God's messengers of comfort for others. So who is there that you know today that is grieving and suffering? And how can God use you in being words and a person and a presence of comfort for others? God bless you, church.